It's interesting. There is a smaller parallel. I mean, what's going on now is unprecedented, I think, but a smaller parallel would be during the Nixon administration. Nixon saw the CIA as part of the deep state,
Right.
like they're against me, and he made a bunch of cuts to CIA that actually came into effect during the Carter administration. Um, and my point there is that there's like this sort of like story. There's some mystique around it, even about all these laid off CIA officers who went into the private sector, and from there it was like the Wild West for these guys. And it's going to be interesting to see where this generation of disenfranchised intelligence officers end up. I mean, some of them will end up working for the Europeans, the Australians, things like that. Some of them might just go over to the other side. I mean,
We have eyes on. Roger.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Eyes On. Today is a special one. We got Jack Murphy and Marc Polymer. A lot going on, more fallout from the chaotic meeting in the Oval Office last week. We just found out, literally just now before we got on, that the U.S. has paused or suspended intel sharing with Ukraine, as well as the military aid from the other day. So, what's up, guys? Marc, how are you? What are your thoughts?
Okay, well, first of all, it's always dangerous for the team house and for Eyes On to have Jack and I on together, because this can now spiral into not only kind of gloom and doom, but also some rage. No, this is great. I'm always happy to be back. But I want to say thank you to you guys. I received a package in the mail yesterday, and my wife is like, "What is this? Like a fucking car bomb, letter bomb?" No, it was 2 T-shirts, appropriately double extra large because I'm fat, from the team house. So thank you guys. I will wear them proudly. I am honored. Love it. Great. I mean, who doesn't love bling? It's good
Yeah,
that's
stuff.
awesome.
Swag.
Swag. So thank you both very much.
Our pleasure. Good show. That was great. Just a little quick merch plug. I loved it. So yeah, back to reality,
sorry.
unfortunately. Yeah, this morning, I guess it just popped off that the US has cut the flow of intel into Ukraine, which is insane to me. I feel like the next step is Starlink, probably.
Oh yeah, and so but one key thing on this, just for the kind of this will probably come out in a couple hours or maybe tomorrow, but just the that story is confirmed. I'm hearing from all my contacts, both in the government and on the Ukrainian side, that the intel has been stopped. There's some confusion on not confusion. There's some discrepancy on whether it was targets inside Russia or cutting off intel targets against Russian forces inside Ukraine. But the bottom line is, I think that that is confirmed. And John Ratcliffe, the CI director, just went on Fox just this morning and said the same. So this is, I think this is something that I was dreading happening after the cessation of military aid. But it really does kind of put this in perspective, and Jack will understand, because it's not just on the Ukrainian battlefield. That, Jack, you might be able to address this in a much more professional manner than I would, based on your background. But overall, I mean, our durability and credibility as an intelligence partner globally, I think, is going to take a hit. So, again, there's never a bottom, and I think we're still plummeting downward. But Jack, welcome your thoughts on the military effects of this.
Well, I mean, it's gonna definitely put Ukraine on their back foot. And I don't. I'm like you. I mean, I'm trying to understand or like search for some sort of like logic or sense behind some of these decisions, but can't find them. Russia has been put basically on the ropes. Their economy is cratering. It's a position that we've never really had the upper hand on them like this before, and I don't know why we would sacrifice that advantage in this era of pure near pure competition or whatever the hell we want to call it, new Cold War. Um, so yeah, it's a mess, obviously, for Ukraine. But as you point out, Mark, it signals to the entire rest of the world that we're not reliable, that you can't work with us. And, there's some thought that the reason why we fought so hard in Vietnam, sort of a somewhat obscure country in Southeast Asia at the time that not many Americans had ever heard of. The reason why we fought there so hard was because we were trying to prove to Europe specifically that we were willing to stand up to communism. Right now, what we're doing in Ukraine, doing this like heel turn on them, it signals something to Taiwan. It signals something to our partners in Europe and also our partners closer to home, such as Canada, that just got slapped with a 25% tariff just yesterday.
I think one of the things is that the little, I mean, so I get up early. I got up at 5 in the morning. Often I have to do TV at that time too, so I'll kind of roll into my computer and I'll do a hit on MSNBC. But every morning there's 3 or 4 different stories which are kind of head spinning, and then that only is based on that day because just 24 hours earlier there were 3 or 4 stories that also were head spinning. So it's the news cycle is such that there are really significant ramifications for these national security for these moves by the administration that I don't even know if we have a time to even kind of do a deep dive or dissect because it's just eclipsed by something else. The cessation of military aid, now the cessation of intelligence sharing.
Yeah, it's
on and on.
intentional.
But you're right. It's intentional. I mean, isn't that what Steve Bannon talked about? What was it?
Yeah.
Flooding the zone? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also following the playbook of that weirdo Curtis Yarvin, who came up with his whole plan to like break the government, and they're pretty much following it.
Right.
They're following the game plan. I saw today another one of those head spinning stories. Veterans Affairs intends to lay off 89,000 employees this year, which is pretty wild. VA is a big organization. It's funded almost, or has been funded. We'll see how long that holds out, to the tune of almost $300 billion a year. And there are a lot of complaints about VA, but that organization has also come quite a long way in the last 20 years. Thanks, a lot of it thanks to public and congressional pressure, that people are like, fix this, like, because they feel that veterans deserve better care. Especially all the things that people were hearing about the GWAT veterans, 22 a day, and all this sort of stuff, did have an impact. And I have a number of friends who are veterans who work at VA in different capacities in different parts of the country, and they're already impacted by this. When I was telling you earlier, Mark, I mean, it's a little hard for me to grasp or understand. Like, if you go and log on to Facebook right now, all I see is retirees, military retirees, just cheering this on.
Right.
And they will tell you with a straight face, these were all DEI hires. They were all woke. We're cutting the fat. We're getting rid of unnecessary spending. Hey, don't worry. This isn't going to affect anything as far as veterans care. It's like, whew, where are we going here? I'm all about trimming some fat, but yeah, if you're like firing the McKinsey consultants or something, sure, but they're firing like the therapists and people who actually work there.
This is madness. I mean, again, I think it's part of the disinformation bubble. I'm sorry, this is the bullshit on Fox News. I mean, I have friends who work there, but it's if you turn on Fox News, you don't hear about any of the pain. This administration, says it supports veterans, yet it's crushing them right now with these cuts. This administration says there was a touching moment last night on the president's address to Congress about a young cancer patient that kind of got a lot of attention, except they're cutting funding for cancer research. And so
pediatric cancer research.
So there's the actual truth of what is going on, which is gutting the federal government without any kind of plan. Look, I think all of us here on the show would say, sure, there's a ton of waste in the federal government, but it has to be, done in a smart, systematic fashion.
And then passed by Congress, which they're not even doing because they just passed a budget in the House that raises the deficit by $400 billion this year.
So none of this is all. I mean, just as someone, I'm from New Jersey, so you guys, you Brooklyn and Queens folks will make fun of me, but I wasn't born, yesterday. I have kind of a brain in my head, and so none of this makes sense. I mean, it's the bullshit PR versus actually what's happening on the ground. At some point, perhaps it'll catch up to them. Jack, you're right. It's the former intelligence community, a lot of folks too, who are on LinkedIn, which I actually got off because I couldn't take it, who cheerleading all this stuff. And now I'm going to get the audience all pissed off. It's a bunch of old white dudes. It just is. It's old cranky white guys who are really angry for some reason about the state of the country or cheering this on. But I think there's tangible effects. Let me throw one other kind of thing out there. I got an email, a signal message. Let me be very clear on that, from a case officer, CI case officer, who on Monday was fired, a probationary officer. They're starting to fire probationary officers, but they're doing it based on anyone who had any kind of blip in their file, a security violation, some kind of bad performance appraisal. Every single one of us in the IC would have been fired then. I had security violation. You screw up every once in a while. You leave the station one time. You don't spin the lock on the safe in your office. You get a violation. It's not ever career ending. It's just saying like, hey, tighten your shit up. They're fired now. And this case officer was absolutely stunned. Someone had gone through language training, spoke fluent Russian, served over there in that part of the world, and was less than 2 years into their probationary status, and now they've been walked out the door. Again, these kind of cuts make no sense, and I think that the only question is, will the American people ever kind of step up and understand what's happening?
Mark, I'd love to ask you if there's a bit of an insider's view you can share with what's going on with Ratcliffe at CIA.
Yeah.
That's one of the appointees. Like, at least I haven't seen in the news too much, or I haven't heard from people I know so much yet. Like, what's going on behind closed doors? Like, because I remember during the first Trump administration, there's a lot of concern about Pompeo. But I talked to people who said he was okay. He wasn't bad as DCI.
I'm one of those people you talk to. I mean, now that's a radically different administration because there were adults in the room. You had, Jim Mattis. You had various national security advisors, but ultimately H.R. McMaster and John Bolton. You had people who would stand up to Trump for kind of his crazy ideas, including Pompeo. Pompeo, who clearly was partisan, nonetheless let the director of operations do its job. And so I think you're right. And he was visible. He actually, went to work and you saw him. And I remember in even in briefings with him, when we asked for something like concurrence to do something, he'd be like, "Why are you asking me this? Go do it." And that's kind of music to our ears from the operations side. I think this is a different time though, because there are no adults around Trump. And so, the best characterization of what I think those in the Pentagon and the intelligence community are feeling now is disoriented. And that's just, there's so much coming at us. And it's both based on policy, such as the abandonment of Ukraine, but also your job security. People don't know if they're going to have a job. I just got a message from a friend of mine from the IC. "Hey, I'm going to work. I'll text you later if I have a job when I get back." There is, fear is the wrong word, because fear is something you use when you're in Afghanistan or Iraq and getting shot at. But I think, significant concern is probably better, because you don't know if you can pay your bills. People have mortgages, people have health care. I mean, this officer who just got fired doesn't have health care right now. And so people are extremely nervous, because it's both, trimming the fat, if you want to call that, with reductions in force at the top, or this idea of getting rid of kind of the lower level employees as well. And so I think the people in the IC are just disoriented right now. And Jack, the thing is that, of course, nobody, I mean, I hope some of your viewers, listeners will understand, there is no deep state. There's no cabal of people stopping, Trump from anything he wants to do. People put their heads down and they just do their job. I mean, I had no idea what anyone's political orientation was in my old shop until after I left. I retired, and then I see someone and they turn out to be from the left or the right just because they're Americans and they can say that. But I think now there's significant worry about the U.S. role in the world now, since we've switched sides to our enemy. Remember, Russia is an enemy of not only the United States, of the CIA. That is one of our absolute. It's not just a competitor, not even adversary. It's an enemy. I mean, Russia put bounties on U.S. soldiers with the Taliban. They've done a tremendous harm to colleagues of mine. So again, combination of we've flipped sides, but also, do I have a job tomorrow? That's not a good mix, by the way, if you want, what I think is, you want our kind of nation's first line of defense to be kind of at the top of their game.
Specifically about Ratcliffe, what are you hearing about him behind the scenes?
I got to be careful on this. Exactly. I mean, I think that what you'd want to see someone, how do I say this in a more positive light? I think the director and deputy director have to be more visible to the workforce at a time of upheaval, which means doing things like Leon Panetta used to do, George Tenet used to do, literally go down to the cafeteria and sit down with a unsuspecting case officer or analyst and have lunch with them, which happened to me. It's, and that's really, and I think that was even a scene in Zero Dark 30 with the character of Panetta. That stuff used to happen. So the director, deputy director have to be visible, especially at times of turmoil. So if I would have any one suggestion, I think they should be more attuned to upheaval in the workforce. See how smart I was there? That was
that was pretty professional, Mark. You held it together.
What are your thoughts on the director of national intelligence going on news and basically parroting kind of Russian talking points and stuff like that?
Well, D, I expect you to be up at 5 a.m. for my MSNBC hits. So if you were to have been up yesterday, you would have seen, because this is the only thing I addressed from 5 until 5:15, and then I actually had forgotten it because it was so early and I was so tired. But look, this is totally not with what someone who role as an intelligence chief should do. So basically, President Zelensky gets dressed down by Trump in the White House, in the Oval Office. And what happens usually is the rest of the government then, who has contacts with the Ukrainians, will be like, hey, that's in the political sphere, like things are going to be okay. That's not what happened, because Tulsi Gabbard then went on Twitter and basically was cheerleading and dissing all over Zelensky. That is absolutely against what any kind of professional intelligence chief would do. It's not their role. What should have happened after that is that the CIA and the Ukrainian side would get together and say, look, our political masters are having a big shitstorm, but we're gonna work through this. That's just what's done. It happened to me when I was at the agency, when in Trump won, when Trump would insult Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, in a Twitter rant, and then I'd have to go mend ties here in Washington with the German intelligence chief. And so that's just what is done. If you think back to the first Gulf War, I know I'm dating people here, but this is when King Hussein sided essentially with Saddam Hussein in the invasion of Kuwait, if you remember that. So the Jordanians were, quote, neutral. But the CIA and the Jordanian General Intelligence Director, GID, kept the ties open, and King Abdullah, the current king now, credits that for the current state of U.S.-Jordanian ties. They said, hey, I remember that you all, CIA, stuck with us under the table. Now, this is done on purpose, of course, by design, because you work through those political differences. Tulsi Gabbard going on Twitter and cheerleading for, Trump's kind of, evisceration of Zelensky absolutely throws that into question. And I cannot imagine the migraine headache my old colleagues in the operations directorate had, realizing they'd have to try to figure out how to unscrew this with the Ukrainian colleagues. And then, of course, that falls, or that now we see today, a suspension in intelligence sharing. And so, Gabbard is, as I said on TV, so I'm not gonna try to downplay it here. She was not fit for the job. And she's acting like a political toady to Trump, and that's just not what her role is. And that actually feeds into all the worries we had about her as the DNI. Just an awful moment. And this is just not me talking. This was kind of the my colleagues, the formers, even across the political spectrum. I had Republican friends who were like, yeah, she really shouldn't have done that. What is she doing here?
Hey guys, it's Jack. I just want to talk to you for a moment about how you can support the show if you've been watching it, enjoying it, but you'd like to get a little bit more involved and help us continue to do this. You can check out our Patreon. It is patreon.com/theteamhouse. And for $5 a month, you can get access to all of these episodes of The Team House ad-free. The same goes with our affiliated podcast, Eyes On, with Andy Milburn, Jason Lyons, Mick Mulroy. That one, you will also get all of those episodes ad-free. And you support the channel and the show, and we really appreciate it. The Patreon members are literally what has helped this company, this small business survive, especially during our early years. And you are what continues to help this thing going, even as we navigate the turbulent world of YouTube advertising. So we really appreciate all of you guys. There's going to be a link down in the description to that Patreon page, and there is also going to be a link to our new merch shop. So if you guys want to go and get some Team House merchandise, we got stickers, and we also have patches. And I should mention, if you sign up for Patreon at $10 a month, we will mail you this patch as well. So we really appreciate that. But they're also for sale on the merch shop. And additionally, they got t-shirts up there, water bottles, a tote bag, coffee mugs, all that good stuff. So please go and check them out and support the show. We really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting time, and it's challenging to talk to friends, colleagues, etc. In many cases. I mean, something is happening within the United States government and to the United States government right now that I don't think most Americans have, it hasn't sunk in yet. They aren't really clear about what's going on or what's being done or how this fundamentally takes America in a different direction, and maybe it's not the one they think.
So Jack, that's a really good point. So that, there's the kind of the day-to-day, outrage or concern over what's happening. But then there's the bigger picture, in the sense of, who are we now? This kind of war on government. There's always going to be a debate on how much kind of government intrusion in our lives is necessary. But I think we could also say that, it's a good thing to have weather forecasters, on the government payroll. They were fired the other day. It's a good thing to have people fighting wildfires out west. They were fired the other day. And the same thing with workers at the VA, including many veterans. And so I don't know if the American people have woken up to the fact that this is a complete dismantlement of the federal government, and people hate government until they need government.
Yeah.
And so to me, again, there's, this is, go back to your old kind of theories of politics. I don't know, are we going to turn into, Ayn Rand? I got to go back and read Ayn Rand, the whole idea of total libertarianism. There's no government at all. Is that really what we want? Because that, what? No one's picking up your garbage. No one's fighting your fires in your house. There's going to be a tornado. It's going to demolish your house. No one kind of warned you about it. So there's parts of this that I just kind of, I think are, and the last part of it, let me just say, is as a former government employee who worked for 26 years, at some point, I'm starting to get irritated. I don't need a pat in the head. I worked at the CIA. No one ever knew what we did, but this hatred on the federal workforce is wearing a little thin.
It's, what do you attribute that to? You touched on it a little bit about some of the anger. There's something, not to wax poetic or play Sigmund Freud maybe a little bit too much, but there seems to be this total disenfranchisement with the very idea of governance, that government can come in and through policies and reforms, they can improve conditions for people. It seems like there's just no belief in that at all anymore across the spectrum. And just the other thing I would point out is that a lot of people are treating politics as entertainment.
Yeah.
And I can't really totally blame them either, because our politicians and our media have both packaged and branded politics as entertainment to them for decades.
Yeah.
And I think that has led us to maybe where we are today. But what are your thoughts about, why? This is clearly, there is clearly some support, public support for this at the moment. There may not be in another year or two.
Yeah.
Where do you think some of those things come from, or that difference in perspective?
So I think, so let me answer this. I was in New York City after 9/11, and I saw how the New Yorkers came together, which was remarkable. I mean, I'll never forget, I lived up on 80th and York, nice Upper East Side, living there. And I remember there was a pizza guy on Second Avenue in the 80s somewhere. He was Egyptian, and I was worried about him. And he hung American flag outside his pizza joint, and he was embraced by the community. Really impressive. I remember President Bush saying that, hey, there cannot be anti-Muslim sentiment based on this. We're not going to war with Islam. We're going to war with Al Qaeda. But there was a feeling of kind of collective goodwill. And then I remember that, and so then compare that to what happened with COVID. 1 million Americans died in COVID. And there was a point in time where there was a feeling of unity amongst the country, but that then all fell apart. And why is it? I'm trying to answer your question, because government, I think, took measures, which I think were understandable at the time in terms of mask mandates and quarantines and shutting down basically the entire country, because they were scared and people didn't know what to do. I mean, my stepbrother's an ER doc in New York. He had dead bodies piling up. I mean, the doctors still have PTS from this. He said they had no idea what they were doing. They would treat a patient. They're coming in. They looked okay. They'd send them home. They're dead. There was bodies. One of my stepbrother's fellow doctors committed suicide after this because they had such trauma literally hundreds of people dying on shift.
Yeah, my mom worked in a hospital, and they had like the refrigeration truck out back.
It's
stunning.
It's bad. Stunning. And so, but then the government reaction to this, which I think was very understandable at the time, is and they got some things wrong, but whether it's shutting down schools, which was very harmful to kids, but mask mandates, which I thought were fine, but people kind of freaked out about. And I think that is where you see this hostility to government now, because there is a large percentage of our population thinks there is huge government overreach on there. So I was thinking about that the other day, is why this hatred of the government? But I think it was people saw that as an infringement on their rights. And that's the only way you can explain how this fucking nut job is now our HHS secretary in terms of RFK Jr. I mean, the man is certifiably insane if you talk to any medical professional. Yet he's lauded last night in the State of the Union as well. Well, why is that? Because he, again, is part of this kind of anti-government sentiment. I don't know. So I think it goes back to a reaction to government measures during COVID. Perhaps it's more deep-seated than that, but to me that was and by the way, that's across the political spectrum too. I mean, this is a silly statement. What I'm going to make is, my son's a big baseball player. He's playing baseball in college now, but his high school season, was canceled because of COVID. This was a season in which they thought they'd win the state championship, and most of the people I live in Northern Virginia certainly are not Trump voters, and they're still furious about this. Why did they cancel school? And so maybe it's just a reaction overall to COVID.
I mean, that's definitely interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, but I'm sure you're right. That did pull the country apart in more ways than one.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm like, there's something off with me now. Well, there's probably a lot off with me now. But every time I go on a goddamn plane, I get sick. I get the flu. I've had COVID a million times. But so like I was on a flight the other day and I wore a mask. I might as well have had a giant dick growing out of my head. Like I was like people were staring at me like I was a pariah. And I was like, hey man, like I'm not getting the flu again. I've got to go on this, I got to go on this this airline flight. But wearing a mask. I mean, there are measures in certain states banning the wearing of masks right now. That's the reaction to COVID. And so, yeah, maybe that's.
I mean, it's interesting that they want to ban masks and like want to talk about like, your body, your choice, and like you could do whatever you want to do. But if I want to wear a mask, that's not right.
Wear a mask.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if you don't want to wear a mask, that's fine too. Like, why are you getting so triggered over the fact that somebody wants to wear a mask in an airplane with like 200 other people?
All right, I have a great little plug for a show that hopefully the listeners will like. There's a show on Max now called The Pit. Have you guys seen it? It's about an ER emergency room in Pittsburgh.
I saw like clips from it.
Phenomenal. It's an incredible show. Again, my brother, who's an ER doc in New York, said it's 100% realistic. But there's a great scene in there in which there's someone who's against masks comes in and in the ER, and she's screaming at other people for wearing masks. And then she's about to roll into surgery, and the doctor says, ma'am, I just wanted to clarify something with you. Um, is it okay if the doctors here wear masks as we're performing surgery on you? And she said, well, I don't know. Why? He said, well, if we don't, you can get infected and you might die. But if you tell us you don't want us to wear a mask, we're happy not to. And she looks at him and she says, wear a mask. There you go. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Swinging back to
Moving
Ukraine
on.
and stuff like that. Can I ask a question? Can Europe fill the void?
Ooh, great question. So I'm a member of about 45 different signal chats on this on Ukraine. So I gotta roll through them every morning. But the majority of people I talk to, and again, as a former intel officer, I'm not a former professional military officer or strategist. But I think there's a lot to be said that first of all, Ukraine can hang on, and just remember we have written Ukraine's death obituary, death notice so many times. And so just keep in mind that, and Jack will get this, there's a couple things in war that I think are relevant. One is, of course, material resources, but also it's the will to fight. And the Ukrainians have that, and that's kind of that intangible. But if you look at the battlefield, so much now is less dependent on kind of I think that the way we thought of things before with with armor, with tanks or even things like that. And now it's all these kind of not only drones, but indigenously produced drones. The Ukrainians have an incredible capacity for these FPVs, these FPV drones. And so ultimately, I think they're going to be able to hold on. To me, I think the big thing would be air defense, and getting the Europeans to kind of step up on that. But again, we've written the Ukrainians obituary many times. And so at some point, I think, and this is not a bad strategy, Europe should say, well, fuck it. The United States has switched sides. Goodbye. You're not relevant anymore. And I can't believe I'm even saying that. But I think there's something to that. And that's if the Europeans can get their crap together and lead. And there are a lot of signs that they will, in terms of leadership from Germany, from France, from the UK. And then don't forget the smaller frontline states who are just savages. Go talk to the Estonians or the Poles about what they want to do and how they want to kill Russians, and it's fun.
Yeah, and we've kind of resisted the idea of not Europe being unified economically, but being unified militarily is something that we've kind of discouraged because Germany will ultimately become the leader of that army, and there are some historical things there that we don't want to repeat. But there's also the larger question also of Five Eyes and how that relationship is going to work, because we're talking right now about the Europeans filling the void that we leave in Ukraine. But if we really are completely out, I mean, how does that affect the Five Eyes relationship and our European partners' ability to collect intelligence?
Sure. And so just for kind of the background for your listeners, the Five Eyes is this incredible, decades-long partnership between the U.S., England, the UK, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. And it is an intelligence sharing relationship in which we share things such as human intelligence, that's reporting from our spies on the ground, and then signals intelligence, that's the communications intercepts. And I think that on the signals intelligence side, there's been a lot written on this. There is interoperability in the sense of the US and the UK share systems. It's very hard to break that. I don't know how that gets broken apart, because the NSA, National Security Agency, that's our outfit, and the GCHQ, that's the British one, are in essence one. And so breaking that is going to be difficult. Where I think it's already happening for sure, because I talk to my especially old friends in the British security establishment. If I get them drunk a little bit, they'll admit this to me. On human intelligence, that's a choice. And so when British version of Russia House, and I know you've had former Russia House folks on the Team House. So when the British version of Russia House collects something based on their penetration of a member of Putin's inner circle, they have a choice. And in the past, they would share that with the United States. They would sanitize it, probably not tell us the identity of the source, but they would sanitize it to a degree, but still provide critical information. You have to remember, for an intelligence service, they have a sacred duty to their agents, to the sources, to keep them alive. And so I don't think anyone in their right mind in the British security service right now is going to say, hey, we can share this stuff with the Americans like we used to. And what you'll see is There won't be a stated policy of it because that would risk the wrath of Trump, but they will just slowly ratchet this back. And I've talked to numerous British officials on this, and they say that's exactly what is happening. You just will never know until you wake up one morning and you're like, we don't get the same kind of stuff from our counterparts. And I'll tell you, no CIA officer would say that they don't understand what the British are doing. Because again, you have a sacred duty to your asset, to your agent, to keep them alive. And the U.S. cannot be trusted now, not only with, dopes in charge, of the U.S. Intelligence apparatus, but also the notion that we have, in essence, switched sides to Russia. The one thing, Jack, that I want to throw out to you, this will be a fun exercise, because if we had this discussion 3 months ago, so many of the things that we would be saying, we would have said, well, we'll never do that. We'll never fire officers at the CIA. We'll never withhold intel or military aid. We'll never gut the VA because that's insane. So one of the really interesting things is if you look at, let's even move forward, the U.S. pulling out of NATO. The U.S. telling the Chinese you can have Taiwan. I mean, I think there are some things that in the past we would have said are absolutely beyond the pale, we would never do, that I think we should consider, because when people, call me up and say, well, Trump will never, just declare himself, emperor and run for a third term. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, nothing is sacred anymore. So what are your thoughts on that? And maybe it'd be fun. What are some of the things that in the past you'd say could never happen that perhaps could happen now?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, we have to get over that that hurdle that we have mentally of that could never happen, or that shit doesn't happen here. We need to get over that real fast because it is happening. And yeah, throughout just my life, relatively short period of time historically, a bunch of things that would never happen actually happened. I mean, everything from Brexit to the 2016 election of Donald Trump. I mean, all these things we were told repeatedly would never happen took place. So I think that, yeah, we're moving in a direction that is more authoritarian. You're right to point out that some of these things can't just be undone. If we pull out of NATO, it's not the same as us like renaming Fort Bragg every 4 years. Like, there's a little bit more to it than that. But I think that, when I make this argument, I feel like I'm at a disadvantage because, quite frankly, making this sort of argument for international cooperation is not as compelling as the America First argument. Is saying, fuck all these other people out there.
Right.
They're taking our money. They're cheating us, and we get nothing for it. I admit my argument is not as sexy or as compelling as their America First argument is, even though I feel that it's really America last, that our partnerships are a vital strategic necessity for us. And, our enemies acknowledge that. That's why the Chinese and the Russians and others are always trying to attack our alliances around the world.
Well, you're
But
right.
also, Mark, can I say something about the America First thing? And I agree. It's like an easy rebuttal to what you're saying in terms of like being involved internationally and like giving aid or whatever. The problem is America First doesn't happen. Our quality of life is not better.
Yeah.
You're telling me even if we pulled out and we cut our budget in half in terms of defense and foreign aid, and we saved $500 billion or $1 trillion, that something would happen for the regular middle class person that's struggling day to day to pay rent, to pay for groceries, to do all the things that they need to do to just live a fucking life. If you were telling me, maybe I'd be a little bit more on the America First side if they were like, you know what, we're going to save money from here and we're going to give you guys some type of affordable or universal health care that's quality, that the rest of the world has. Basic things that people should deserve. Then I'd be like, you know what, I'm kind of on their side too, but I've yet to fucking see it. The only people I see benefiting are the robber barons, whether
Bezos, Musk, Thiel.
Correct.
Right.
If I was a hedge fund manager or a significant shareholder in a big company, yeah, I'd be loving it too. But I'm not.
Well,
not
they,
like
they might
nobody else
not be
is.
loving it much longer, seeing the way the stock market's going.
Right. Yeah.
So this is my Jersey blue class, upbringing right here. I just went to see Dropkick Murphys, by the way, in concert. I think I told you guys that.
Yeah.
It was awesome. That's like the new Resistance. I was talking to Adam Kinzinger, like we want to get like a Dropkick Murphys resistance concert form. But one of the things that the amount of grift that is going on is stunning. And I guess the American people don't care that you can go and pay $1 million to have dinner with Trump, or this golden visa where for $5 million anybody, including a Russian oligarch, can now get citizenship. I mean, it's one thing after another, where kind of the blue collar guy and gal, the middle class, is not being advantaged whatsoever. And how about the tariffs? The tariffs are going to crush the working class. So the whole thing is just preposterous in terms of I didn't do that well in economics in college, but I know a thing or two. It just doesn't even make sense with economics. But I think one of the things to look for is what I thought was kind of interesting is these town halls. Where people are kind of pushing back to the point where there was a kind of a directive from the Republican leadership in the House saying, don't do them anymore. Yeah. Well, if you can't face your constituents, I mean,
from the Republican campaign committee, which is like, you go to the town halls to try and, make some money and raise some money.
And if you look at, again, I'm going to quote the American Enterprise Institute, the AEI, that's a think tank in the United States. That is certainly not a bastion of progressive liberalism. It is a conservative think tank. And in their study on Ukraine aid, on the 150 plus billion, a huge majority of that actually went to defense contractors, who do what? They employ American citizens. And so the aid to Ukraine is excellent for the U.S. economy. Now, you can make the whole argument like, oh my God, this is the military industrial complex, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, the American worker is benefiting from our aid package to Ukraine. And so I think that's the way you and by the way, most of these jobs are in red states. And so that's the retort. You say, well, we're giving all this crap to Ukraine. I said, yeah, but your brothers and sisters down the street in Alabama have a job because of it.
Well, yeah, you want to talk about bringing jobs back to the United States. I mean, the war in Ukraine brought back the artillery shell manufacturing base to the United States, where, I mean, we made them all along, but we ramped up production like drastically, opening up a number of new facilities to do that. And a lot of Americans, they don't understand that, how foreign military sales in general work. And it is a little scary when you hear about it, because it does sound like a military industrial complex. But the larger point is that when we give this military aid to a foreign country, Israel, Egypt, Ukraine, whatever, we're not just like giving them money, and we're not just sending them war material. We're basically giving them monopoly money and saying, hey, you have $5 billion. You can spend it on whatever American defense, weaponry you want. And so that money never even leaves the United States.
Yeah, it's like store credit.
Yeah, it goes to the United States arms manufacturers, American jobs, as you point out,
in red states. And
then that war material is sent over to Israel, Egypt, Ukraine, wherever. So yeah, I mean, it's important to understand that.
Hey, let me switch topics just because something's on my mind. That was what came up last night in the president's address. And that's obviously in an operation run by the intelligence community, and with the help of the Pakistani government, it looks like we are extraditing one of the masterminds of the Abbey Gate bombing at HKIA at Hamid Karzai Airport. If you remember, 13 American
Marines,
women. Not all Marines.
Oh, sorry.
Marines and some other folks as well from, I think, Navy and the Army were killed in a suicide bomb attempt. But so President Trump makes these remarks yesterday. A couple of things on that, and then of course you see all this stuff on social media, which I have to stop reading from the FBI director, from the CIA director, et cetera, from people around the Trump national security apparatus saying this is Trump. He did this. Again, so we take an event which I support, of course, which is the apprehension and extradition of a terrorist, and we fuck it up. And this is how, because number one, this operation, a high-value target operation, takes months, if not years, to germinate. It's intelligence-driven. The agency was following this individual. It's been out in the press already. And when we finally get them on the X, we can do a couple things. We can conduct a drone strike, call in the JSOC brothers and sisters, or go to Pakistani liaison for help, and that's what they did. They went to the Pakistanis and they captured him. This has nothing to do with whoever's in power, and literally the Secretary of Defense and others were saying this is a victory for Trump. We made this a priority to get the perpetrators of Abbey Gate once we got into power, and that is utter and complete bullshit, because this operation has been going on for months and months. This was a high value target. Everything is intel driven. And to compound all that, then Trump goes out and says in the State of the Union, thanks to the government of Pakistan, who right now is having a fucking aneurysm. Because if you understand Pakistani domestic politics, it goes like this. We'll help you, but please don't tell anybody about this. So now we've screwed up a relationship that if we were trying to rebuild with Pakistan on CT, which has always been strained, now it's kind of gone down the shitter. And it reminds me of the Soleimani strike of several years ago. Righteous strike. Killed a really bad guy, but then Trump has to brag about it. So there's this inability of this, and every administration is going to try to take credit, but in particular here, saying that chest thumping, saying that this was a priority of Trump. That's just total bullshit. This is based on dogged work by the intelligence community following a high value target for years, and it finally comes to fruition. And I know this because this is what I did for a living for years and years. And it doesn't matter who's in power. You get the guy in the X. You figure out a way to bring him to justice, either kinetic strike, maybe put JSOC on the ground, or you go to liaison for assistance. But they take
they like taking curtain calls even when they don't.
It's just it drives me crazy. No, every president does this.
Sure, but at the same time, like you could probably do it in a better way where you don't expose or kind of like expose your allies in terms of the people that helped you, because Pakistan and the Americans' intelligence sharing has kind of been a tale of two fucking faces, right? For the last 20 years, right? So
this literally, it's been called the Trump operation, and I'm just like, oh my god! And it's anyway. So that's what
there's like this interesting like desire for instant gratification right now. And people talk about, oh, he's a businessman, and it's transactional, but transactional's not bad. There's a give and take. Like, okay, I get that. But when you're really just looking for like short-term successes and victories that you can tout in the media, you're sacrificing the deferred gratification, the long-term strategic successes.
Especially when in South Asia right now, with the rise of ISIS-K, and I'm sure you've had guests on talking about this. ISIS-K is probably the biggest threat to U.S. interests at this point, as a kind of classic old terrorist group. Not so old, but we need all of our allies' assistance, because we have no boots on the ground. We have no eyes or ears in Afghanistan anymore. And so the Pakistanis, as much as I find them completely irritating, as I was subject to multiple 107mm rockets fired by the government of Pakistan at my base in Afghanistan. I've talked to you about that story before. The Pakistanis and AQ were kind of shooting at us, but ultimately the Pakistan would be an intelligence partner that's worth investing in, again, if we can in some fashion, but kind of thanking them globally is not something the Pakistani government, because domestically it's now they're going to be on kind of under the gun anyway. That was just kind of something this morning with all this kind of chest thumping that they're doing, and it's a great CT success. But again, what I find this administration, and others are guilty too, other administrations, but and I've criticized the Biden administration when they did stupid stuff like this, but the idea that somehow this is the political masters kind of taking credit for this is ridiculous. I mean, there's a lot of work in the intelligence community and military that probably went into this. Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure they've been looking into this since that day in August of 2021, right?
Again, it's not like, so the press reports were like, the CIA director said on his first day, this is going to be a priority, except it was a priority on his, the day before he got there, because conceivably my old colleagues have been working on this. Again, high value target operations don't just kind of come from the snap of a finger.
He didn't walk into a 7-Eleven and somebody called the cops and they got him.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
that's what it sounds like, because, and so just, again, it's just, you kind of just.
Something that's breaking right now, I guess, in a response to the tariff stuff, Chinese embassy, if war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, ready to fight till the end.
Great.
if you're China, right, and you see what's going on with Ukraine, and obviously there's a different relationship between a bit of a different relationship between Trump and Xi and Trump and Putin. If you and you see that America's gonna probably invest in like our own U.S. made like chips, the chips that are like the high end chips.
Well, that's what he says. Yeah.
Right. If you're Taiwan or you're China, I'd be freaking out if I'm Taiwan, and I'm licking my chops if I'm China, if they were really serious about taking Taiwan.
So Bill Burns, who was the CI director, obviously before Ratcliffe, said in a speech maybe a year or so ago that 2027 would be when the U.S. assessed China would be ready to invade. And I will tell you that we're basically giving them a green light. We are not going to stand by Taiwan as an ally. We are not going to put U.S. lives at risk. And I think Trump, again, will see this as some kind of weird transactional thing.
Yeah.
But if I were the Taiwanese, I'd be crapping my pants. Because and let me say, alongside that, if we were to come to the aid of Taiwan in defense of Chinese invasion, we would have to have a significant U.S. military buildup. And right now, they're cutting the Department of Defense. Now, there's a whole other issue on that, whether you believe in kind of a defense buildup or not. But DoD right now, I don't think is configured to fight a war against China. And the defense budgets with this kind of cost cutting, this Doge cost cutting, are not going to reflect that as well. But I think our allies would be very well served to look elsewhere. It pains me to say that. By the way, I'm getting texts right now from a good friend of ours who should be on the show.
Are you really?
Mick Mulroy is asking me about shit that's going on. So, what the hell? He should be on with us right now.
That's so funny. I think he might have texted me also.
In a second when I get off here. I said, hey, we're just talking about you.
Yeah, he texted me too.
Yeah,
he texted the group chat.
Tell him we are on air mocking his absence.
Not being here.
Anyhow. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, one of the things that, Jack, for you to think about too, based on your experience in the military is, what do you think, or I'm curious, what do you think people in the 75th Ranger Regiment or in the special or in the Green Berets are thinking now about this kind of this abandonment of an ally? Because I will say that more than likely, just like the officers at CI in the paramilitary world, probably those in SF as well, are generally pretty conservative. But I would think that they're bothered by us walking away from an ally that they spent a lot of time with. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I can't say that I have my finger on the pulse necessarily, like across the board, but I think there's going to be a range of opinions, but probably the predominant one is going to be leaning towards your point, being upset about some of these partnerships dissolving that they put a lot of hard work into, even if they are, whatever their politics are. I mean, it's still, impacting their mission. So I think from purely a professional standpoint, some of them are going to have problems with what's going on.
So think about this, Jack. All right, so you're still back in. You're in the military. We've decided your career in journalism is done, and you're going back in.
You're like the new chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. You're like the new chairman.
You're leaving your cafe lattes in Brooklyn, and your poetry readings, and
I ain't fucking leaving.
And you're back in there. But on a serious note, if you were in an ODA right now, and let's say you are where I'm going to make this up in working with the Philippine government on their counterinsurgency, at some point, someone on the one of our allies is going to say, "Hey, thanks for your assistance right now, but can we count on you all? Because we're looking at what you did in Afghanistan, we're looking at what you did in Ukraine. How can we?" And so the question for you would be, what is your response to that? And I just say that because there's the SF/case officer model of case officering or schmoozing your partner, but they're not stupid.
Yeah.
So how do you address that?
Well, I mean, I've seen it and I've been in the room for it a number of times, including in the Philippines, actually.
There you go. Yeah.
And I mean, the answer to the question is, I mean, you're going to give them the party line, which is The United States government stands shoulder to shoulder with the Republic of the Philippines. We're in this together. We have the greatest commitment to this country, blah, 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 blah. But as you point out, yeah, they're not stupid at all. And they're looking across the table at you like, okay,
Right.
yeah. And so as a military professional, you're put in a very challenging position
Right.
there where it's like you kind of like have to walk into the room and lie
Yeah.
at that point, and that's not a great feeling, I think, for most soldiers to talk to an ally like that. But it exists.
Yeah. I mean, it's you could say, hey, we're going to be here until we're not. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody. I saw. I have a funny story. I was up in northern Iraq with the Kurds in 2002, December of 2002, before the invasion. And I was obviously that, what is it now, 2025. So that was 23 years ago. I was much younger in my career. And I remember giving a senior Kurdish official that rah-rah bullshit U.S. speech about promoting democracy. And literally he said, stop. He said, we have been betrayed by everybody. He said, we've been betrayed by the Iranians, the Iraqis, the Israelis, the United States, the French, everyone under the sun. So he goes, stop with the bullshit. And I said, okay. That was it. So, because our liaison partners are smart. And so perhaps one of the things that, that notion of the bright shining city on the hill, that kind of speech ain't going to cut it anymore. And it's much more transactional. Hey, we're here to help with you right now. I'm happy to do this. The problem is, of course, and what I'm sure you're seeing amongst the paramilitary crowd at CIA, remember, they have been with the Ukrainians since 2014. I know you know this. You've reported on this. One of my roles before I left as ops chief over Europe and Eurasia is, it was, and that was before the Russian invasion, was, investing in this relationship. And so there's going to be some pissed off, paramilitary officers, I would imagine SF as well, just because it's impossible not to. If you make repeated trips over years to Ukraine, that means you break bread with these people. You know about their families. You know about people who've been killed. Maybe their families have been raped and murdered. Maybe they've had members of their unit killed in action, the Ukrainians. It's just a human reaction for a U.S. national security professional to get close to their liaison partner. And so I think there's going to be some, just as the Afghan withdrawal was traumatic, I think there's going to be some pissed off people here now saying, well, hold on a second. I just spent 10 years investing in this partnership. I know Sergey or whoever it is. Like, these are my brothers and sisters. And the other thing is Ukraine Russia was a David versus Goliath fight. Like, we talked about it last time. This was the moral clarity that we didn't have in the 20-year GWOT, which went all sideways after a while.
It was an actual just cause. You know what I mean? Like,
it's interesting. There is a smaller parallel. I mean, what's going on now is unprecedented, I think, but a smaller parallel would be during the Nixon administration. Nixon saw the CIA as part of the deep state.
Right.
Like, they're against me. And he made a bunch of cuts to CIA that actually came into effect during the Carter administration. My point there is that there's like this sort of like story, there's some mystique around it even, about all these laid off CIA officers who went into the private sector. And from there, it was like the Wild West for these guys. And it's going to be interesting to see where this generation of, disenfranchised intelligence officers end up. I mean, some of them will end up working for the Europeans, the Australians, things like that. Some of them might just go over to the other side. I mean, especially if that's our new,
they said
our national policy. Is
there was a report a few days ago saying that Russia and China are turning their eyes towards the people that have been let go to see if they could.
Yeah, of course they are.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, think about it. So first of all, one of the, a retort would be, well, fuck those people. If they're going to go spy for Russia or China, they didn't deserve to be, they're not great Americans. But that's not how the intelligence business works. What I'm concerned about is I'll call it the LinkedIn model, is that they will be commercially recruited. Now, the Chinese and the Russians are all over LinkedIn. And so someone who has just been let go from the U.S. intelligence community with a TS clearance, who has a mortgage and doesn't have health care, is getting an email and saying, I'm a Dubai-based consultant, and I would love your assistance on X, Y, and Z. And it's totally done commercially. And people are going to bite at that. And that's going to be the modus operandi of the Russians and the Chinese and going after our folks. It's not Vladimir from the Russian consulate in New York City coming up to someone. It's a commercial recruitment, and people are going to be desperate because you just are tossing out people with TS clearance, top secret clearances, who have bills to pay. I mean, one of the amazing things is when we advise other countries on stuff like this, on a purge of the security services, this is the exact thing we say don't ever do. And this, of course, is what we did in Iraq with debathification. If you put, several thousand angry, former security service members out in the street, they're going to turn on you. And so I just think that there is a big counterintelligence concern, and it's not, again, someone walking into a Russian embassy. It's someone responding to a commercial recruitment, and and it's going to be over time, but they're going to get wooed by some Dubai-based or Singapore-based entity to end up providing intelligence. My friends in the FBI literally are writing me signal messages saying this is a problem right now.
Yeah. Couple things to look out for tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow, March 6th. The European Parliament's going to vote on a big aid package, 800 bill.
Yep.
So we will see if the Europeans do step up. Hopefully they do.
Kallas, who is the EU foreign policy chief, she said we need to have a new leader of the free world now. America is no longer the leader. I mean, that to me, these are devastating statements.
Yeah.
It might not be wrong.
I mean, it's kind of crazy how, that role right now for the time being is being filled by Zelensky. I mean, this guy in Ukraine who he's standing up to both Russia and the United States at the same time. I mean, he's got some balls.
The idea that he was supposed to apologize for that Oval Office meeting, I think is so patently ludicrous. Again, I'm going to piss off a lot of people who might listen to this, but what I said on the air the other day is, those who demand an apology from Zelensky, those who are screaming at him for, quote, disrespecting the president, which I think is ludicrous. I've seen the clip a million times. I think it was totally set up, and J.D. Vance was acting like this little yappy terrier attack dog. Nothing against terriers for the dog-loving viewers. But anyone who says that Zelensky must apologize, that is actually a tacit admission that our president is a petulant toddler who has to be handled with kid gloves. If you're the president of the United States and you have a foreign head of state come, they can have a frank discussion.
Yeah.
But Trump is acting like a mafia don.
His skin is paper thin too.
It's paper thin, and so people who say, "Well, Zelensky mishandled this," are actually admitting that Trump is a toddler who can't handle any type of criticism. I mean, it's to me, a great leader is someone who will sit there and have a discussion with someone, and you're going to have opposing views. And you say, and that whole exchange, even though it should never have been in public, the right retort would have been, President Zelensky, your passion is so admirable. We'll continue this discussions later.
That's not happening from Trump, man.
Right, but I'm saying, the fact that it can't be is an admission of his, narcissistic, sociopathic personality. And again, that he's a toddler who just, he cannot handle any type of criticism. So Lindsey Graham, the senator, when he throws a fit afterwards in a press conference saying, Zelensky mishandled this, you're admitting he mishandled it because Trump is, such a kind of this flawed individual.
Well, Lindsey Graham's a mutant. Like he just goes however the wind flows. Like a week before that, he was on stage with Zelensky praising him, right?
At Munich, yes.
Yeah. So you also saw Secretary Rubio right after tweet like Trump did the right thing for America. Meanwhile, he looks like he's about to get a colonoscopy when he's sitting down in the Oval Office.
But yeah, that's what I was saying before about how I think this country's changing in some ways that people haven't really wrapped their heads around. And this like cult leader following is not a healthy direction.
I mean, again, it is amazing to me. Marco Rubio has been someone who's been a champion of human rights. He's very well respected in the Senate. Obviously, Cuba is a huge priority for him. But if you are anti-Cuban, you are just by definition ingrained in your freaking DNA anti-Russian. Cuba and Russia are the same thing. And the fact that he is kind of signed on to this. I mean, there was an article in Vanity Fair yesterday.
Yeah, I saw it.
Which talked that Rubio is kind of upset about his lack of influence. I mean, if he had honor, he'd resign. Now, everyone thought he wouldn't last a year, but
he wants to be president. He wants to run for president. is what he wants.
Well, I mean, it just, I mean, these people have to be able to wake up and look at themselves and their children, in the eye. But again, I have kind of this, Jack, I know you kind of like this stuff. I have friends in the Cuban exile community down in Miami, who I was talking to them yesterday, and they were big fans of Rubio, and I'm like, well, hold on a second, what's happened to him? Like, something's not right here. He's supposed to be anti-Cuban. That means anti-Russian, and he's not signing on to that. So we'll see if these people who've kind of signed on to the cult ever kind of get a spine. But even Mike Waltz, same thing, former Green Beret. They're kind of bending the knee to Trump, and
I've heard that Rubio and Waltz are both on the way out.
They should be. They should resign. I mean,
like being fired.
Yeah,
yeah.
I've heard those things too, but who knows? And it's but ultimately, you have to be able to kind of look at yourself in the mirror. But this is a cult, and this is a country that is now tilted completely to Moscow, and that just is inconceivable. And that's why I said before that you said what's the reaction inside the IC? I said it's disorienting. That's what are we doing? And the other part of this too, and I know we're probably kind of coming to the end right now. There is, and I'm gonna be kind of hammered for this, but there's no bureaucracy going on right now. Bureaucracy in national security at times is important. There's no National Security Council process. And Jack and Dee, the way this works is things come to fruition at lower levels. You have meetings at the NSC, then it goes up to the Deputies Committee, which is maybe, with deputies of different cabinet levels are there, chaired by the National Security Advisor. Then there's a Principals Committee where the president might sit with the various cabinets. None of this is happening now. These guys sit in the Oval and kind of, they are totally winging it. And so, my friends in government were like, literally the freeze in U.S. aid to Ukraine, people, all the national security reporters down the Pentagon who sit in the Pentagon said their Pentagon contacts didn't know. I mean, we're winging it.
Yeah.
And so that actually makes it challenging in the media because you don't even know what's happening half the time. There's no people to even tell you that things are going on because they're finding out literally real time. And that's not the way to do really smart, effective policy. You don't want a 400-man and woman NSC like President Obama had, which is then stultifying, but you don't want nothing. And my, friends of mine who have been down to the White House recently, I mean, it's empty. The NSC is not staffed yet. The State Department's not staffed yet. We are winging foreign policy right now. Probably not a smart idea.
Oh, brother. I don't understand why I never feel good about the end of these shows. Every show we do,
hey,
no matter what.
Me on.
No, not with you, just you, Mark. I'm saying even the ones we do on the weekends with Mick and Andy and Jason, it's like, fuck. What about a feel-good story? I guess there isn't one. Mark, where can they find you?
Until I get kicked off, I'm still on Twitter at @mpolymer. I've actually decided to go back onto Twitter full force because it's fun fighting with all the MAGA loons. But there are a couple people who I kind of have normal dialogue with. I'm on Blue Sky as well, whatever the hell Blue Sky thing is. And then I'll be on, I'm on TV all the time. I think I was on MSNBC 15 times last month, but mostly on at 5 a.m. on way too early, which, hey, I'm old. I get up now early anyway. So
Jack Murphy, We Defy. The link is in the description. Mark's links are also in the description. Check them out. Mark's cooking something up too in the podcast world, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
And get some merch. What Mark just said, they're incredible t-shirts. So the link is in the description there. And the best way to support the show is patreon.com/theteamhouse. You get ad-free episodes, both audio and video, for both Eyes On and the Team House. So 2 for the price of 1. If you join it at a $10 level, I myself will send you one of these patches at the $10 level. So support the show, please.
One good thing for you guys is that with this is not a good thing for America, but maybe for the show is with the slew of retirements and people getting fired, you're going to have some new guests coming on.
There's that, yeah.
I guess that's good.
That's good.
Thanks, guys.
I will always keep referring people over to you. So
appreciate that,
Thanks, Mark.